Good morning and good afternoon to my European viewers, and welcome to a very special episode of The Angry Astronaut. I have with me today Derek Harris from Skyrora. I'm very excited about this. As all of you know, or most of you should know in any event, I've made several videos about this company, this new and innovative company looking to launch small sats from Scotland, possibly elsewhere. Very excited to have you on the program, sir.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for inviting me along, Jordan. It's a really good thing to be here, and I'm happy to be able to speak to you and your followers.
Wonderful. So let's get right into it. Most of my viewers are fairly familiar with your company now. Can you tell me, some would say that the small sat launch provider market is in danger of perhaps becoming saturated. What is it that's going to make Skyrora stand out in the crowd with, SpaceX doing rideshare, with Rocket Lab, and even companies, in your own country like Orbex, Black Arrow, etc. What's going to make Skyrora stand out?
That's a very good question there. So what makes Skyrora stand out against the likes of the competitors that you've mentioned is it's our dedication to sort of the environmental aspects of launch as well. We're really pushing forward to try and make launch as clean and green as minimum footprint as humanly possible. After all, what's the point of launching small satellites for Earth observation to try and save the ice caps, stop the global warming and deforestation, things like this, if you're just going to not care about it yourself and put the biggest, dirtiest footprint on Earth for every launch that you do? It's kind of counterproductive. So that, for me, is one of the main things that we push with them. Second of all, I would have to say with the education and outreach as well, is and I think the second aspect that helps make us stand out is the fact that we have built on the historic project of Black Arrow, that done this and also used it for education and outreach purposes. So we've really built our brand on educating the UK public and hopefully the European public that there is this chance to have small launchers on our own doorstep, that we don't need to go all the way back to America or go to China or Russia as such to have these options for satellites being launched. And so far, I think last year it's kind of reached the pinnacle for the company when we've been going for maybe 5 years, and we advertised a couple of intern roles and we got over 300 applications. This sort of is showing that people are taking space more seriously in the UK now, and that there's a lot of talent and people coming through with talent that we can nurture. So we're hoping that talent is also what's going to help us not only lead the way and be a pathfinder, be the trailblazer with that, but also basically mark it out as why you should sort of launch with ourselves.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. From a technological standpoint, anything that stands out from the Skyrora XL, for example, and the various options that can be put on it that makes it stand apart from other launch providers?
Yeah, I think there's three main points I would say that really are hard to rival when it comes to using our XL vehicle. One would have to be the actual G-forces on the actual payloads. Because of the combination of the oxidizing fuel that we use, it gives it a much smoother ride, so it hopefully will allow for more delicate instrumentation to be launched. On top of that, as I said, the fact that we look for the minimum footprint with regards to launch. And then the last part I would say has to go directly down to that fuel and oxidizer combination. With EcoSeam, the fuel that we make from the waste plastics, it actually is coming around and giving us a better characteristic on the burn. So it's giving us maybe about a 2 to 3% better ratio and more power compared to the normal kerosene that we would use for launch.
Excellent, thank you. And that leads me kind of into another question. We're talking about environmental impact. I had an opportunity to interview some folks in Iceland that worked together with Skyrora in terms of getting approval for you to test a rocket there. And one of the conditions was to retrieve anything that Skyrora put into the ocean to retrieve the first stage, that sort of thing. Is this something that you intend to be as part of your model to retrieve the booster, that sort of thing, post-launch from whatever ends up in the ocean?
Yeah, I think at the moment it's very early days to say it's something we will do 100% on every launch. I do say at the beginning of the program it will be something we'll attempt to do on every launch, and the reason for that is there's a lot of information that can be taken from the after it's discarded and brought back. We can see performance, we can see if there's anything that can be reusable and how different components can maybe be reused for future launches. So I would certainly say for the first few launches, you will see us try to claim everything back. In regards to Iceland, when we made that agreement with them, it was specifically with Iceland, and they have a very strict and stringent policy on their fishing waters, which, given that's where a lot of their economy comes through, that and whale watching, tourism, things like this, we really wanted to work hand in hand with them to make sure that we didn't sort of mess up any areas and make anything untoward or messy or basically just leave any fuel spills or anything like that. So we wanted to try and make sure that we minimised that impact of sort of being in Iceland, and that's why it works out so well working hand in hand with them.
Can you tell me why a decision was made to launch from there?
Yeah, certainly. Well, Iceland came around. It was a little bit off piece for us. So we've been looking at obviously the F ranges and Andoyas and wanted to actually do it in the UK. But when we went through looking at getting permits and such in time, the regulations just weren't mature enough. They weren't fully complete. So we wouldn't have been able to do any of the launches that we wanted to do at that point. We spoke with Iceland after meeting a member of the Icelandic Parliament at an event. I can't remember which event now off the top of my head, but they asked us to come across and speak to them because it would be something they would be interested in, as Iceland has quite a big space heritage, mostly to do with analog missions and testing landers and things like this and sort of those type of vehicles. So when we spoke with them, there was quite an appetite there, and so we just followed that sort of lead all the way down, and it turned out it would work out for both of us arrangement wise for cost purposes, timing, and allowed us to keep our program moving.
Great. Well, to add to that, do you have any plans of doing future work with them?
Yeah, we always are open to going back and forward with them. So I know we have spoken with Iceland quite a bit about future launches to see. We still have a few other things that we'd like to test out, and so they are on the radar for that. But also, as I said, when we were across there, we did some, again, education outreach and meeting with them, and you're finding out some of the main universities in Reykjavik are above and beyond with what they're doing in regards to sort of design and some of these reusability aspects and technology. So it's something we've also tried to foster a little bit of a relationship with, and hopefully that will come to some sort of fruition in the future as well.
Connected to your parachute recovery, one of my viewers asked a question as to whether or not you plan to or have any ideas of expanding this system to do perhaps what Rocket Lab is doing, parafoil recovery, that sort of thing, in midair. Are you exploring that as Rocket Lab is looking to do right now?
At present, I can't really confirm because I'm not too sure what the future plans may hold in that aspect. As I said, I know our main plan is after the first few launches is to recover the parts to see what reusability would be like. And at that point, we will make our next step in that design review to move it forward to the next generation. So let's say XL.2, for example, to say how we want to recover. Could we do it under parasail, like you were saying, or we're seeing other people try and capture them with helicopters and other, obviously SpaceX is, I think, the gold standard, landing it on a ship in the middle of the ocean. I think small launchers are a long, long way away from landing back, just because of the amount of fuel that would take. It would then no longer be sort of feasible financially and economically. But I do think you will find it's going to be a sort of dog-eat-dog way going forward, and that there has to be some sort of movement to try and find the capturing and recovering of these parts.
Thank you. And also, I've spoken a great deal about your space tug and secondary missions that can be accomplished with that. In theory, in the future, can you give me kind of an overview of this particular feature of your future rockets and what sort of secondary missions you might have in mind?
Yeah, so the Space Tug is a great vehicle and a great design. And what we're really looking at is a sort of taking a modular approach. And the reason for that is it allows us to expand and to have as much in-orbit servicing missions as possible, or secondary missions. So for example, if you can have a module which will help connect to a satellite to refuel it, you could do refueling missions. We have modules which have robotic arms. Can it be that it'll be easier to dock, and maybe, for example, if a satellite's been damaged on launch, can we fix it up there? These are the sort of things that we're looking at through the design process at the moment to give access to this. And obviously, you've got good people out there like Astroscale that are looking to sort of help with the space debris. It could be, well, they're helping with the smaller parts that they can collect and bring back out. We are able to sort of take older satellites, if we can get a grip of them, and drag them back into the atmosphere. That was kind of what the Prospero principles, which one of my colleagues, Alan Thompson, has raised recently, was the question of the Prospero satellite. It was a sort of three-step approach. Can we get it? Should we get it? And how do we get it? And to bring it back to Earth.
So yeah, that's where I was looking to connect further. Actually, are you guys looking at collaborative work with the LEO cleanup operations? I mean, the UK Space Agency is obviously setting up these collaborative agreements. The ESA is setting up collaborative agreements for LEO cleanup. How are you engaged in that, and how would you like to be engaged in that?
Well, from an economic point of view, we'd love to launch any company that's wanting to go up and clean up space. So please feel free to contact us if it falls into your remit. But in full honesty, and with that, we are trying to work with a lot of European companies again with that, whether it be to provide the launch to or to help with the testing of their vehicles, or being part of a consortium to use that space tug and to give it different options. So there's a few things that are ongoing at the moment, but nothing I can really go into detail on this call.
I got it. Okay. So, but it fits very well into your overall mission, I think is what I hear you saying. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it should. It's really there with the mission that we want to do, and I think it's there, has to be with the responsibility as well. Nowadays, I believe if you want to launch things into space, you have to take some responsibility for what's left over. So it's really part of our core culture as well as our mission.
Can you tell me a little bit about your spaceport ambitions? A little bit about some details as to where is it going to be, how extensive is it going to be, what sort of services will be offered there, etc.
Yeah, certainly. So with that, we've got at the moment we've recently started to sign documents with Shetland Spaceport. For those who may know, that it's the most northerly island in Scotland. And that's what we're currently going through negotiating, and they're going through their building process at the moment. What we're hoping to be able to give from that site is we're hoping to be able to give refueling, charging, everything you would normally get at an up-to-date sort of spaceport, but with a limited infrastructure, if that makes sense. So we don't need to have big capacities in buildings such as you would have at Cape Canaveral and things. Because it's on such a small island, it's easier to close things off for security purposes. The area that the spaceport is being built in, really what we're looking at is having a pad. They're having an integration workhouse and warehouse sort of thing, and then a little bit further away, your sort of mission controls. So really, you're talking maybe 3 or 4 buildings with the pad, so not a massive infrastructure. And if we take on top of that the mobile spaceport that we have, which we can do launches with as well, that falls down to basically similar to how SpaceX started out and how Rocket Lab started out with the containerized approach, whereas all we need to take is maybe 10 to 12 containers, which can be stored in the area and then brought out when we're doing a launch, and then all we need is those containers in the actual launch pad as well. So it's a very minimum infrastructure requirement.
Now, something that's talked about fairly frequently amongst my contacts in the UK is the overall support from the government for UK spaceflight, as opposed to United States companies that want to operate out of Great Britain. For example, what will probably be the first satellite launch from UK soil, at least if everything goes according to plan, will be Virgin Orbit launching from Spaceport, Cornwall. And even though Sir Richard Branson's obviously British, Virgin Orbit is most decidedly American. Do you see a shift developing in that to where the British government is getting very much behind homegrown launch providers?
There are movements, and I think it would be far too easy to come on here and just basically deride the government for what they've done so far. But I think what we need to take a look at is really, in the first instance, it was only Virgin that was going to be there. The other companies have followed a few years afterwards. So when space launch and satellite launch from the UK was first thought about, it was always the sort of Virgin route that was looked at. Now that these other competitors like ourselves, Black Arrow or Bex, as stated, have came to the forefront and shown that we have the technology and we're moving forward, they've had to sort of open their remit a bit further than what they originally intended to do so. And by doing that, they've also started to grow. So the UK Space Agency has grown quite substantially over the last few years. There's been some changes with the appointments of the CEO. So there's a lot of good positive changes coming and taking place. So yeah, at the beginning, they may have not been set up fully for launch, but I do believe that they're trying to manoeuvre themselves into a place to make or basically give the best of British launch.
What, by the way, is what do you think is the reason for this sudden explosion of private spaceflight in the United Kingdom? I mean, although there are private spaceflight companies in other European nations, the UK, we've seen a lot of this. Why do you suppose this has happened?
I'm a little bit cynical when it comes to that, if I'm honest. I do think there's lots and lots of companies that are coming out to do so. My only worry is a lot of them aren't fully there tech-wise. They're no better than a sort of PowerPoint or a couple of CAD designs for that purpose. And some of these ones are coming out and they're taking funding away from companies that actually could use it. So for those ones, I'm a little disappointed to even hear them be mentioned at point. But for those that are actually in the game, and why people are coming in with that. So the likes of ourselves, it was our CEO who had the funding in place and wanted to push. He saw that there was going to be a gap for small satellites being launched and decided that's what he wanted to do with that. And the main reasons behind that is satellites are what are basically going to help make the world run over the next 10, 15, 20, 100 years. This is what controls it. So we want to try and bring space back to the normal person on the street. So people walking up and down the street at the moment don't think that the sat-nav on their phones or the Pokemon Go games and things like this are all done from via satellite. It's trying to bring that education forward with them, make them aware of that, and these are the whole sort of reasons behind us sort of pushing into that market. And I believe from the other companies we've spoken to, it's kind of been similar. They're aware of this gap in the market and people are now beginning to be educated in the way of what they are and understand why it's needed. And once that sort of all the dots are connected, the market will flourish even more so, because we believe the governments and not just sort of national agencies such as the UK Space Agency and ESA are going to get involved, but we do believe private companies will come in. So, for example, if you look at major banks that do insurance, once they realise actually the information they get just now costs them X amount per year, whereas if they were to go in with a company and have their own satellite launch. They could get the data they needed daily or whatever the case may be at a much more reduced rate. The market can only get bigger for that. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of private investors coming in, because they can see this change. Not necessarily that the money is in the rocket side of things, but with the satellite launches and the data, it really is the big enabler in the space sector.
Thank you. To kind of jump over real quick to a big opportunity, obviously, that's come from the UK, and that is OneWeb and the massive investment that's been put into that. Do you feel that Skyrora has an opportunity there? Do you feel that Skyrora could be used as a launch provider for OneWeb as opposed to using Arianespace rockets that are frankly being manufactured in Russia? Do you see an opportunity there?
Yeah, I think if we wanted to launch all their constellations, we need to get a bit bigger than the vehicle that we've currently got. Obviously, we can only take 350 kilos. But so I believe, my understanding, that would be just one, maybe two of OneWeb satellites at max. They obviously want to go for this price of scale, so by being able to launch quite a few more, and that's why Ariane's so attractive to them. But I think, again, it doesn't always mean that's the main mission that we can work for them for. So as we said earlier, it could be replacement satellites going up. It could be that if they need satellites manoeuvred, to be moved, to be corrected, to be fixed with the in-orbit servicing. Because I really believe that will be the bigger market. And if anything, I think that's where Skyrora could compete, especially when it comes to OneWeb for business.
Now, here's a question for you, a bit of a loaded question. If we're talking about funding, we're talking about Skyrora getting much bigger. Let's say that you guys got an investment of $1 billion a year. In other words, the minimum that Blue Origin gets every year. What could you do with that kind of funding compared to what you have now?
Oh, that is great. If we were to get £1 billion in funding, that is a very, very big question. I think you just have to look at what we've done over the last 5 years with only 30 to 40 million, I think is the figure we spent. I would need to double check that with our accounts team, but we've built basically the biggest test stand outside of ESA in Europe. We pushed our technology to the forefront. We've brought in a brand new state-of-the-art 3D printer, which allows us to print a machine, and is one of the biggest ranges in the world now. And then on top of that, the recyclable fuel, so we've came in with that as well. If we were to get an investment of $1 billion, it wouldn't be choosing between the ideas of how we can make things better, make things cleaner. That would actually give us a huge opportunity to sort of chase down a lot more rabbit holes, if that makes sense, to see some of the ideas that the team have about how we can make things better. So I think that it would be a complete game changer. I think you would see Skyrora, if you pardon the pun, rocket forward a lot of brand new years.
So clear this once again. If I'm understanding what you're saying, you guys have accomplished everything that you've done and gotten to the edge of being capable of going to LEO for 30 to 40 million pounds. Is that what you're saying?
Roughly, that is the indication of the number and figures that I believe we've spent over the last 5 years or so. I would need to 100% check that with the accounts team, but I believe that is the figure that we've got there, yeah.
That is truly mind-blowing really, I'm being completely honest about this. That's amazing that you guys have accomplished all of this with such a modest amount of funding. It is quite astonishing, and I would think that a lot of other companies could learn from that. Okay, let's go ahead and I'm gonna make a couple of jumps here. Sometimes I ask the tough questions on this channel, and I understand that there may be very little you can say about this kind of matter, but as I'm sure you're aware far better than I, that there is a fairly strong movement in Scotland to cede from the UK and become part of the European Union again. Do you guys, I'm not asking for an opinion on that matter, I'm simply saying, do you have a contingency plan should that occur, or do you think that would not, change your operations at all, were that to happen?
I can confirm we have contingencies in place. So on the run up to Brexit, we had to run through many different plans and business plans to be ready for that. So we do have a few different plans in place. From a personal point of view, if it was to happen, I don't really think there'd be too much of a change. There couldn't be, just the way that the UK is set up. That would be like splitting up the United States and expecting each of the states not to really get on or talk to each other as well. We would have to still have that strong relationship with London. We'd still need it with Cardiff and Swansea and such to continue forward. So if it does happen, I don't think it'll be as big a change as people would expect. Maybe just a few years of pain, kind of like what we're suffering now with Brexit.
Well, I'm sure that's a response that was especially interesting to my viewers in Scotland, and I have quite a few of them. So, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. So, is there something you would like to add in terms of upcoming plans? What are you the most excited about in terms of what Skyrora is doing soon?
Really, I think the big two things that I've got coming up over the next year or so is going to be the big launches of Skylarkel, the suborbital vehicle, which is now ready and just waiting for our licenses. And then we are en route to have Skyrora XL finished by Q4 2022, and we were hoping to have permits in place to have that launched as well. So it could be that we get to launch our suborbital and orbital vehicle this year. And if we can pull both of those landmarks off, again, that would be absolutely tremendous for a company as young as ourselves to do so. And for me, I just have to look overseas at the moment. Obviously, I saw the likes of Firefly and how well they did in their first test. And for me, that if we could emulate that and have a test go as well as that, or even better, it would be a tremendous year for ourselves.
Yeah, no doubt. That is exciting. Actually, that brought to light one more question. Scott, your L rocket, your suborbital rocket. What sort of customers might make use of that? And do you have customers lined up already, say, for both your rockets, actually? But what sort of applications suborbital do you have?
Yeah, well, I'll cover the XL first. So we have 2 or 3 clients in the pipeline that are coming through, and we've got sort of all the paperwork and the legals and stuff being started there. And hopefully we can announce them so you can hear them in the near future. With that, but a lot of them are waiting to see heritage, and this is kind of where the Skylarkel has came into it. This gives us a first stage heritage, really, as most of the vehicle that's in the Skylarkel is just enlarged and placed into the XL. So it's a very similar system with that, just a few other parts, really. But the marketplace for the Skylarkel is actually one that I believe is untapped at the moment. From talking to a lot of the universities, and I believe it could be one that's used for an educational purpose. If we can get the price down per vehicle to a reasonable, it's already not too expensive, but if we can still bring that down through the economies of scale, we can sort of help PhDs, we can help people doing microgravity science work and things like this. So we have currently spoken to 2 or 3 local universities who are interested in going on the demonstrator vehicles that we're going to be launching soon. And if those work out, we want to then sort of say, well, this is how much it's going to cost, this is how much of the payload it can be, then this is all the microgravity, this is what can be done. And we believe there's a marketplace there for the universities and for pharmaceutical companies and others like that that want to have their technology tested and their experiments tested in a zero-G environment.
Wonderful. Well, all of that is very exciting. I don't suppose you have a price point for the XL as to how much it's going to cost you to launch your flagship vehicle.
Well, with that, the price point that we have been going forward with, and I think everyone will know this, is the marketplace is really pushed with people going with SpaceX's 5,000 per kilo. Again, when we look at that sort of price, you need to take a huge amount of space for that. For ourselves, we've always marketed over the last few years saying the starting point would be about 30,000 per kilo. And then again, it depends on which services and such that their clients require. If they're wanting a dedicated vehicle, it could be a bit more. If it's a ride share with a few others, it could turn out to be a bit less. So 30k is the one that I would really say.
Okay. Well, that, is that dollars or pounds?
I'm going to go with pounds
Okay.
for that.
Just to be safe.
Just to be safe. Just to be safe. If I give the wrong one, I don't need to worry about our CEO, as my accounting team will have me for that.
No, I quite understand. Well, you've been very helpful and very informative today. I really do appreciate everything that you've done. And like I say, the fact that you've accomplished all this with such a tiny amount of funding, this is both inspirational and really something that American companies should follow. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me along, and I look forward to speaking to you in the future, Jordan.
So what truly amazed me more than anything else in this interview is the fact that a tiny company in Scotland with a tiny fraction of the funding of companies like Blue Origin is at the edge of going to orbit this year or next year at the latest. And that's something that all space companies should emulate. So until this happens, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.